Tony Khan confirms that major changes are coming to AEW television next year. He's also talking about if we would see CM Punk inside of an AEW ring in 2023. Also talked about the departure of Cody Rhodes from AEW to WWE, possible unhappiness amongst the AEW roster, amongst more in this big interview. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. Happy holidays. Hope you had a fantastic Christmas day yesterday. Hope you had a good Boxing Day over here in the UK as well today. But we've got to talk about Tony Khan. We've got to talk about some AEW news. As always, there's plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. And the biggest story comes from the AEW president himself. Tony Khan has done this wide-ranging interview with Fightful's Grapsody podcast and has spoken about a variety of big topics that actually I think do give a really good indication as to what's to come in the future for All Elite Wrestling as we end 2022 as we head into 2023. As I mentioned, this is all part of the Grapsody podcast. I think it's available right now. It's live on Fightful's YouTube channel. There'll be a link in the video description below because it's really important to aggregate and give people credit where it's due. He spoke about a variety of topics, the AEW president, CEO, head of creative, etc., etc. And I want to touch on all of them. Now, we don't have the actual quotes just yet. They'll probably be coming in the next few days, but what we do have is some real key points coming out of the interview. So let's start off talking about production. Let's talk about production changes coming to AEW. We know that a new Dynamite is coming in 2023. We know that Michael Mansory and the AEW production team have been working for the best part of about 12 months to revamp, rejuvenate, give AEW Dynamite a different look, a different feel, new graphics, new staging, new pyro, new everything. Same when it comes to Rampage as well. They want to give that certainly a major facelift, a major change, try and raise up the ratings for that program, especially when it comes to really looking like a third hour of Dynamite, and it pretty much is anyway, but they want to change that as well. So speaking about these heavily rumoured and discussed production changes, Tony Khan, as I mentioned, spoke with Grapsody for an interview that goes public today at noon Eastern Time. It's live right now. Now, Khan confirmed that the changes to AEW Dynamite won't just be from a production standpoint. He said that there is a new look for the show that he's excited for. He specifically said there are changes to the set that are coming and visual and production changes that will be made and will stick around. He said, quote, "The wrestling is going to be the same great wrestlers and the same great fans, but it's a new city, Seattle, and the look, the changes to the set and the presentation are going to be changes that we're going to keep. I'm really looking forward to the new look for the show. I find in wrestling, when you overpromise, you can disappoint people. It's a set and a presentation. At the end of the day, the most important thing is what the fans bring, what the wrestlers and the staff of AEW and the crew bring every week. But the look of the show is important too. It's going to look really cool," Khan said. Now, I think that's really interesting because that's not the first time he's specifically used the words overpromise. I believe he did an interview. I think it was with Bustin' Open Radio. It might have been some other radio station. I forget. Nevertheless, he said the same thing, that I think it's really important when you're in wrestling that you don't overpromise, and to me that sounds like Tony Khan learning a lesson, maybe, because he's made lots of big announcements on AEW program. He's made lots of, groundbreaking or game-changing announcements in AEW history, and some have lived up to the hype and others have not, and maybe he's starting to realize you can't do that. And even if the announcement is big, if you keep saying that over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's like the boy who cried wolf, isn't it? Eventually, people aren't going to believe you. And when it comes to actually doing a really big announcement or unveiling something really big, people aren't watching anymore because they'll be like, well, you said it last time and you didn't deliver, so I'm not going to listen this time. So I think he's probably right when it comes to that mindset. As far as the production stuff, I know we've spoken about this a few times now, but it certainly is interesting when it does come from the proverbial horse's mouth, isn't it? That he's essentially saying, look, we are going to have major changes. He confirms there's going to be changes to the stage. There's going to be changes to production. There's going to be changes, I guess, to the music and to the intro of the show. We've kind of already seen that. I think the advertisement that aired during AEW Rampage on TNT on Friday with the sort of red and blue sort of LED lights that they have and the studios and the promos that they've been shooting with the wrestlers over the last few months is certainly going to be a big factor of the show. I don't know. We haven't heard or haven't seen any leaks of what the staging is going to look like. We don't know if they're going to move away from the two-tunnel system. That might be something that they do. I kind of like that. I do like the two-tunnel system that they have. I think it's something that is really different to WWE. They don't do it. I liked it when TNA did it back in the day, and they actually did it differently to to AEW. Eventually, they had the two tunnels there coming out of either side, but originally it was actually at either end of the soundstage there at Universal Studios, and I really like that. It's always one of the biggest bugbears, isn't it, of when people make one entrance, you have to think that both wrestlers would be next to each other backstage, and why aren't they fighting there? So if they're at opposite ends of the arena, that actually makes a lot of sense from a kayfabe point of view. I doubt they'll be able to do that just from an arena point of view. That's very challenging to do. That's why you have to do it on two sides of the stage. So I hope they keep that. But if they do keep that, what else can they really do? I suppose they can make the screen a lot bigger. They could get rid of the chandelier. They could elevate the stage a lot more. I prefer an elevated stage as opposed to a flat stage. Or look, they might just go something completely different. They might completely ditch the tunnel system and go with something completely different. I'm not sure. I think that whatever they do, there's a couple of things that's important with it. One is that it looks different from WWE. They have to make sure that they don't look exactly like the competition. That was one of TNA's biggest mistakes back in the day, and I suppose WCW's to an extent as well, is eventually wrestling shows start to copy each other enough and they start to all look the same. And once they start all looking the same, what's there to really differentiate? Yes, you've got talent. Yes, you've got the name of the show, but you really want to tune into Dynamite. If you're tired of WWE, you want to be like, okay, I want to tune into something different, and you don't want to just see a similar version and a WWE light, as it were. You don't want to see that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. I know some people have already, and I guess this is social media, some people have already started to criticize the color scheme of the light, saying you had to pick two colors and you had to pick red or blue, which I guess I see that. It's a good point. I mean, look, red and blue are very big colors, but they are two colors you would associate with WWE brands. I kind of liked the idea of when Dynamite first came around, when it first aired on TNT, they had the sort of powder explosion or the paint explosion, and it was a multitude of colors. It was this explosion of color onto your screen, and maybe they're trying to go away from that. Maybe they're trying to sleek things up. I'm not sure. So if we get any new looks or any leaks or any photos of the new staging, of course, we'll show them to you here first on the channel. Now, some other things that he touched on during this interview with Grapsody, like I said, links in the video description below. Let's talk about the UK show. What we do know is in 2023, AEW is going to be doing their first ever live event over here in the United Kingdom. As far as where, as far as when, and as far as what the title of the show is going to be called, etc., no new details on that. Tony Khan has said he doesn't know when he'll be able to say when and where the UK show will happen. He's working on some logistics of it. My prediction is, logically, it would make sense that it's in Craven Cottage, which is the Fulham FC stadium in West London. The reason why that makes sense is because Tony Khan and the Khan family own it, so they wouldn't have to pay any money to Fulham or to the Khan family. If you own it, you can use it to your pleasure and to your extent. So they would be saving a lot of money when it came to building rental, etc. So I would assume it's going to be at Craven Cottage, which is a beautiful destination of London, West London, absolutely fantastic area. It's right on the banks of the River Thames as well. It's an old stadium. They're currently renovating it quite a lot. A lot of money's going into it. They've been building or renovating that stadium for a couple of years now. It's starting to look quite nice. As far as capacity, I believe it's like 20-odd thousand, 25,000, something like that. So it would probably be their biggest attendance they've ever done. They'd sell out easily. They'd sell out. Obviously, huge fan base over here in the UK, so they would sell out. But it wouldn't be to the level of doing the Principality Stadium like WWE did in Cardiff. It's not that massive a stadium, but certainly they could maybe, again, whilst he's thinking about logistics, it might be something else. Look, the Khan family very nearly bought Wembley Stadium a few years ago. It was a big story over here in the UK that the Khan family was very close, and that by all accounts the reason it didn't happen is because there was such an outcry from the British public or the English public that our national stadium was going to be sold and not owned by the Football Association, the FA here, that the Khan family ultimately backed off. But there is that relationship there with Wembley Stadium, and maybe they would go there. But I think what they're going to do is it'll be at Craven Cottage. If it is going to be at Craven Cottage, I think the logistics he's probably trying to work out is it going to be done by the time that all of this renovation is done? That's probably one part of it. Another part of it is the football season, of course, that will end around May time. It's a little bit longer this year because of the World Cup, so it might be a summer event, and I suppose if it is a summer event, he doesn't want it to clash with WWE's big summer events like SummerSlam and what have you. So it'll be things like that, plus also what happened around the summertime this year for AEW, Forbidden Door. So I suppose it's a combination of several things. They're trying to figure out when the stadium's going to be finished, when is the renovations going to be done, when's it going to be available, what's their other pay-per-view calendars looking like, etc., etc. etc. So I would think it's probably that, but most likely it'll probably be summer 2023. It will probably be at Craven Cottage, which is in London. Now, as far as January 4th as well, which is AEW's big next Dynamite, or the first Dynamite of the year, which of course is this one that's going to feature all of these new changes. He was asked if he was going to do something else similar that happened on January 4th on TBS or Warner Bros. Programming, and that was the Finger Poke of Doom. That was actually on TNT, of course, was the Monday Nitro back in 1999. And he said he will not commit to not doing a Finger Poke of Doom. Now, he said this is largely a joke. Don't get hurt over it. He says that AEW and WCW get a lot of comparisons because they both aired on TBS and TNT, and they have guys like Sting, Shivani, and others who have worked for both companies. He said that they're way different companies, and AEW going away, like WCW, isn't a concern because they're not owned by a media property. He's not going anywhere. And it's funny, isn't it? Because every time you talk about AEW and the future of AEW and, you know, the new television deal and all that kind of stuff, there are these people that are convinced they will just not hear it any other way. AEW, they're going to be out of business in 3 years. The answer is they're not. They're just not. Now, is AEW going to be as big as they currently are in 3 years? Well, that's a really good question. That is a good question because anything's possible and things can change in the world of pro wrestling. But in terms of running out of finance and running out of backing, AEW is not going to run out of money anytime soon. They're not hemorrhaging as much money as WCW was in its last few years. The only reason they haven't turned a profit was because of the investment into the video game, which is a bit of a gamble because we don't know how that video game is going to pay off. It's a one-shot video game. It's Fight Forever, plus then we add in sort of downloadables. So it'll be interesting to see how well that does. But I suppose even if it doesn't, they're not going to be working on that video game every year. So if that is the case, you would think they'll be profitable next year or the year after that or the year after that. The fact that they've been, as I said before, new companies in general, especially pro wrestling companies, but new companies in general, they don't turn profits for like 3 or 4 years. So the fact that the only reason AEW didn't turn a profit was because of their video game shows how well they're doing. Especially they went through the pandemic as well, and they were still this close to turning a profit, which is a big deal. That's a big deal. So AEW isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Most likely, I think 90% chance they get repicked up by Warner Bros. Discovery. Warner Bros. Actually has an extra option they can use. The money goes up and then they'll renegotiate once again. That's a possibility. So as far as AEW becoming the next WCW or disappearing anytime soon, it's not the case. It really is not the case. And frankly, as a company, they've been able to do things that other competitors to WWE haven't been able to do since WCW. I mean, again, I know people like to say, oh, back in the day, but TNA had better ratings than AEW. But at the time, Monday Night Raw had like 5 million people watching. Now it's got 1.7. Television has changed since then, and frankly, if you want to look at AEW's pay-per-view buys, no company's done that since WCW's disappeared. So they're going to be fine. That's the point, is they're going to be fine. Now, one company that we don't know really that much about is Ring of Honor, of course. Now, Tony Khan was on the record several times saying he wasn't ever going to run a Ring of Honor show WrestleMania weekend. He didn't want to have anything to do with any of his companies, his brands, running shows during WrestleMania weekend. He didn't like the perception of piggybacking shows during WrestleMania weekend. Well, he had to do it this year because the show, Supercard of Honor, was already promoted. That was already being set as the big reset, the big relaunch of Ring of Honor. And once he purchased the company, some matches and the show had already been announced, so he had to do it. However, it was brought up during the podcast that one of the hosts, Righteous Reg, mentioned that he actually found Ring of Honor during Mania weekend in the past, opened his eyes to the possibility of fans discovering the brand during that weekend. Something that Tony Khan had also said, well maybe I will run shows during WWE WrestleMania weekend. I tend to think that he probably won't, and I don't think it's a case of, look, that's the hub of pro wrestling that weekend, right? You got 2 WrestleMania shows, basically Thursday through Tuesday. It's all pro wrestling, and it is smart for independent shows, and it was smart for Ring of Honor to do it when they weren't owned by Tony Khan, to run shows during that weekend, because all of the pro wrestling fans in the world essentially fly out into one place. So of course you'd run shows. But I think for Tony Khan and AEW, it's not about that. I think it's more about perception, and he wants to have the perception that he doesn't need WWE's help to succeed. And I don't know if we should expect that to continue. I think that he most likely will want to keep that independent and under the AEW umbrella and in the AEW bubble. most likely. Now, speaking of Ring of Honor as well, it was also brought up by one of the co-hosts, Righteous Reg, that he said that Chris Jericho wasn't a Ring of Honor champion he was really in favor of. Now, Tony Khan countered that and said that Jericho drew good numbers and was an experiment that worked out for him. He said specifically he's happy about the fan interaction for the Ocho chant. Now, the Ocho chant is very fun, but in my opinion, that being the best thing that came out of the Chris Jericho Ring of Honor World Champion reign would be a bit of a problem for me. You go, what's the best thing about Chris Jericho? What did it really deliver? Did it deliver business? Did it deliver ratings? Did it deliver tickets? And if you go, well, the Ocho chant's cool, you go, well, I'm not sure that's the best thing. If that's the best thing out of the run as champion, I'm not sure. Now the Jericho Ring of Honor Championship reign is over, and you do take a step back, who did it really benefit apart from Chris Jericho? Chris Jericho beat these former ROH champions, great. Did any of them really benefit from stepping in the ring with Jericho? Not really. It managed to piss CM Punk off because Colt Cabana was one of those guys that wrestled Jericho. Did it deliver a better buy rate in terms of the Ring of Honor pay-per-view? No, it didn't. Final Battle did worse than Death Before Dishonor did in the summer. Did it do better in ticket sales? No. Did it do good in terms of television ratings? Well, not really. It didn't spike the TV ratings. The ratings are pretty much the same as they were a year ago, maybe just a tiny bit down. So that whole Ring of Jericho thing, and Jericho looking to destroy Ring of Honor, did it draw? Not really, to be honest. I mean, not any more than out of the norm. And I think that, you know, if Chris Jericho and Tony Khan were really going to look at that, they would probably say, you know what, I probably expected a little bit more. And is anyone better off because of it? Is anyone more over? I don't think Claudio Castagnoli, honestly, is any more over than he was coming into the feud, coming out of it. I don't see that. It felt like, in retrospect now, something for Jericho to do. And I could have understood it. At the time, the way I kind of made sense of it was that Jericho holding the Ring of Honor World Championship makes sense if you're going to launch Ring of Honor Weekly Television as a cable television series, because that's what you did with Dynamite on TNT, and it worked. So it would make a lot of sense from Tony Khan's perspective to do the same thing, but with Ring of Honor. But ROH couldn't get a TV deal. It's on a streaming service. It's on Honor Club. So I don't know, honestly, was that a success? Probably not. Probably not. Now, continuing to talk about past Ring of Honor champions, Tony Khan was also asked about Jonathan Gresham and said he couldn't speak too much on the former Ring of Honor World Champion's departure from AEW / Ring of Honor / ROH. Of course, he has now signed Gresham to Impact Wrestling after his departure from AEW. So he's done with AEW. Tony Khan said that he likes Jonathan Gresham and likes Impact Wrestling and is happy for them. You will not really get Tony Khan to go really firmly on the record about people that have left the company. We'll talk about that later on. But Gresham is done. It would appear he did not get a conditional release from AEW. And it's just one of those things, I suppose. It didn't work out. You know, he was the ROH World Champion. Clearly, he wanted more from Tony Khan. He wanted better contact. He wanted better communication. But at the same time, I don't know if that's Tony Khan's fault, and this may be me giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt. The buck does stop with him, but I think the fallout of that was that the talent relations department has to be better in AEW, and maybe that is Tony Khan's fault, in fairness. But the talent relations department was completely rejuvenated and altered and changed, more people added into it. I still think it needs to do a lot better. I still question what Christopher Daniels is really talking to or about, because a lot of these issues are talent relations issues, because frankly, you know, Jonathan Gresham, it shouldn't be that he can constantly be in contact with Tony Khan, because that wasn't the case with Vince McMahon. Yes, you would hear about these people going, yeah, I spoke to Vince McMahon at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But they were top talents. The rest of the people had to go through talent relations. And you had these stories about waiting outside Vince's office. And it's the same with Tony Khan. He runs multiple companies. To me, that's a talent relations issue and a breakdown in communication there. So hopefully that's been improved. But if not, that's something that Tony Khan really needs to look into. Now, arguably, the biggest departure of AEW this year was Cody Rhodes, right at the beginning of the year, February, actually, just before WrestleMania. Then he returned to WWE at WrestleMania. Now, when asked about the American Nightmare's departure, Tony Khan said that Cody Rhodes leaving was a major challenge, and that anytime you lose a talent of his caliber, it not only impacts the roster and in-ring, it impacts several different departments. Jon Moxley coming back was a big help to them, and you know what is so strange thinking about Cody Rhodes and AEW? AEW at this point. I saw a picture of Rhodes the other day. It was about this time last year. It was the Holiday Bash edition of AEW Rampage, I believe it was. And he defeated Sammy Guevara for the TNT Championship. Became a 3-time TNT champion. And there was a big outrage at the time. Do you remember that? I can't believe he's ended Sammy Guevara's title reign. It's funny to think what a difference a year can make, isn't it? And Cody Rhodes in AEW just seems a million years ago already, doesn't it? It shows how quickly pro wrestling and the pro wrestling universe evolves. Because that feels like a million years ago. And he just, in retrospect now, for someone that was a founding member of the company, an original AEW, original EVP, he just seems so out of place. So out of place in AEW. He was a WWE superstar in AEW. And that's not a diss towards AEW or WWE. That's just to say, I think his viewpoint on wrestling and sports entertainment is just far suited, and his character was far suited to WWE. And I think there's a credit to him. He feels like a bigger star since he's gone to WWE. I think that's fair to say. Like he's most likely, he's one of the names being considered to end Roman Reigns' Undisputed Universal Championship reign, which is incredible. Do I see him ever going back to AEW? I think there's something in that. I do. But not for a long, long time. He's got a long WWE contract, and he's making a lot of money with WWE right now. Paige Van Zandt was a name that was in AEW very briefly, if you recall, this year. And now she makes a lot of money and commands a high dollar amount. Tony Khan said he would love to have her come back. He says it wasn't a one-off match. Of course, she had that match earlier this year and is open to it down the road. He says they need to have the right opponent for her. I don't know if her heart's really in that. I mean, I saw an interview of Gangrel, who trained her, and he said that basically she did the match and he's never heard from her again. So I don't suspect to see her in a ring once again. He also reflected on promoting Forbidden Door, that big breakthrough pay-per-view extravaganza of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and said there were a lot of challenges in promoting Forbidden Door. He said that at one point he had to say, quote, "We've got to get some of these guys over from Japan to promote the show. New Japan having to run their own promotion while sending talent overseas had to be a difficult thing to set up." He said he was originally jealous of the Ring of Honor New Japan Pro Wrestling relationship, and he also kind of opened up on just how different a show that was meant to be. Speaking of CM Punk, he said CM Punk and FTR were supposed to be a trio for pretty much the whole summer, and a lot of the Forbidden Door card wasn't as they originally planned. Remember, it was meant to be Punk versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. It was meant to be Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. I think there were other plans. They wanted to probably go in for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship as well. I don't think they probably wanted that to be a fatal four-way match. A lot of that show changed, and a lot of the plans this summer changed because of injuries. And again, it's funny to think what could have been, because had CM Punk not injured his foot, there's a very high chance that whole incident, the all-out incident, wouldn't have happened the way it happened, because that festered. And I think that the distance of Punk not being there for 2 months was a big problem in all of that this summer. Of course, some of the stuff happened prior to Punk getting injured, but I don't know if it would have exploded the way it exploded with Punk being away. And again, it's just interesting to think all of these different pivot points throughout the year of what happened and how badly it went at points. Now, speaking of the backstage issues in AEW this year, Tony Khan has said, you're never going to be able to keep every single person on the roster happy. He also said that a series of circumstances led to people not being on TV or not being featured, and he takes the criticism with a smile. I think that's kind of implying about Miro and other people. There's been a lot of people that have been off television for periods of time this year for a variety of reasons. Injuries, which at the time people didn't know about. Creative stuff, personal stuff. It's very difficult to say, isn't it? But there just feels like there has been this murmuring of discontent in the AEW locker room this year. And I think that's exacerbated by the turnover and changing regime in WWE. I think that really shone a light on that, because at the time, and suddenly this competitor WWE, which always was perceived as, it's the biggest company, it's the best place to go to make money, you'll become the biggest possible star there, but working there is hell. And the guy that runs the company is this crazy 70-odd-year-old man who is completely out of touch with pro wrestling. And of course, when he left and Triple H assumed power, then suddenly it became, this place is great, and it's WWE, I can do the things I always wanted to do. And Triple H, he understands the business, he understands pro wrestling and all this kind of stuff. And now, a couple months after that, you suddenly go, well, actually, as Tony Khan kind of says, you're never going to keep everyone happy. There's already started to be those people that maybe aren't as totally happy in WWE. There's already started to be that a lot of the people we brought back have kind of under-delivered, and some of the people are like, I lost my spot to those people that came back. Too many people came in. So all of that kind of stuff, I think it's going to go like that. It's going to shift back and forth in 2023. I really do. And finally, Will Washington from the Grapsody podcast asked Tony Khan if we'll see CM Punk back in AEW in 2023. Not surprisingly, Tony Khan said he appreciates the question, but he can't answer that. And that's Tony Khan's go-to. He doesn't really say any more details. He goes, I thanks for the question. I appreciate the question, but I can't answer that. Which isn't a yes, and it isn't a no. And I did a video the other day asking, could CM Punk come back to AEW in 2023? And the answer is yes. He absolutely could. Is it likely? At the moment, it's probably unlikely. But I think as time goes on, as I said, time heals all wounds. Not just the one physically he has with his torn tricep, but at the same time, also the issues he has with the Young Bucks. The references to Punk, they've started to open up a little bit more and more and more on television. And I wouldn't rule it out. That's all I'm saying. I would not rule it out. And if they manage to pull it off, it'd be the biggest storyline in AEW history. But there you go, guys. That's the latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below. And I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.